Okay, picture this. It's early 1917. The Great War is tearing the world apart. And right there in Washington, D.C., a single decision is on the table. A decision that won't just decide the war, but will literally shape the entire 20th century.
So, what if America had chosen differently? What if the US had just stayed out of World War I? It's a huge question, and pulling on that one thread unravels pretty much everything we think we know about the world we live in today.
You know, the road to war wasn't some straight line. President Wilson had just won re-election with the slogan, "He kept us out of war." But then came the provocations, one after another. The sinking of the Lusitania, Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, and then the real bombshell, the Zimmermann telegram. By April 1917, that was it. America was in. But, and this is key, the country was anything but united on the decision.
To really get why staying out was a very, very real possibility, we've got to look inside America itself. It was a nation completely at odds with itself.
I mean, look at this. In 1917, America was a powder keg of different loyalties. You had millions of German Americans and Irish Americans who, for obvious reasons, were deeply skeptical about helping the British. Then you had the powerful East Coast elites who were all in for the Allies. And then there was this huge isolationist streak, especially in the Midwest, where people just wanted nothing to do with Europe's endless quarrels.
But here's the other piece of the puzzle. Money. A lot of money. By 1914, America was an absolute industrial giant, making more stuff than Germany and Britain combined. And while it was officially neutral, it wasn't really neutral, was it? A British blockade meant trade with Germany basically vanished, while American banks and factories were sending billions in loans and weapons to the Allies. The US economy was already betting big on an Allied win.
Okay, so let's play this out. What if America resists all that pressure and just stays home? How does the Great War actually end? Because without American cash, and more importantly, American soldiers, the entire equation on the Western Front just completely falls apart. By 1917, you have to understand every single country involved was on the verge of total collapse. The sheer horror of battles like the Somme, we're talking 1 million casualties in one battle, had bled every army white. The French army was dealing with mass mutinies, Britain was nearly bankrupt, and Germany was literally starving from the blockade. It was a brutal, bloody stalemate. So you take the 2 million fresh American troops out of the picture, and a decisive Allied victory? It's just not going to happen. Most historians land on scenario 1, a peace without victory. Everybody is just too exhausted to keep fighting, so they finally drag themselves to the negotiating table for some kind of messy compromise. Yeah, a small German victory is possible, but it would have been a shaky one, with the British Navy still owning the seas. And this is where the dominoes really start to fall. A different end to the war means a completely different kind of peace. And that changes, well, everything. See, in our timeline, the Treaty of Versailles wasn't a negotiation. It was basically a verdict. Germany was forced to take all the blame for the war and was hit with reparations so huge they were designed to cripple its economy for generations. This created this deep, burning anger that just poisoned German politics for decades.
But in our alternate timeline, that whole chain reaction just breaks. No US entry means no decisive Allied victory. No decisive victory means no power to enforce a brutal peace like Versailles. And without that humiliating war guilt clause and the crushing debt, one of the biggest, most powerful tools that Hitler and the Nazi Party used to claw their way to power, it just vanishes. The political fuel for their fire is gone.
The consequences just keep spiraling out. They completely reshape the futures of the two countries that would go on to define the rest of the century, Russia and, of course, the United States. Seriously, think about Russia. America's entry made the war drag on, and that's what pushed Russia past its breaking point. It created the perfect storm of chaos for the Bolsheviks to sweep in and take over. If the war ends earlier with a negotiated peace, maybe the provisional government there survives. Or, at the very least, you end up with a much weaker, less powerful Soviet state. Just like that, one half of the entire Cold War equation is either erased or massively downgraded. And the other half, America? Without being forged in the fire of 2 world wars, its path is completely different. It never becomes the arsenal of democracy. It never builds that globe-spanning military that came to define it after 1945. The US is still a rich, powerful country, for sure, but it's more of a regional heavyweight, not the world's undisputed superpower. The bipolar US versus Soviet Cold War as we knew it never even happens.
Now, this isn't just a story about Europe and America. That one decision back in 1917 sends shockwaves across the entire planet, and it dramatically changes the lives of hundreds of millions of people living under colonial rule.
World War II, in our timeline, was the death sentence for the European colonial empires. It absolutely bankrupted them and broke them morally. So, without that second, even more destructive war, Britain and France have the money and the will to hold on to their colonies for a lot longer. The road to independence for countries all across Africa and Asia is delayed, and it happens in a totally different way, without the US and the Soviets trying to influence everything.
So what does all of this add up to? Let's pull all these threads together and try to sketch a picture of this strange alternate 20th century. This is the world that America's choice could have made. Instead of those clear, epic showdowns that defined our history, this timeline is messier. It's a century of tense, uneasy peace broken up by smaller, regional wars. It's a multipolar world with a bunch of competing powers, maybe a German-led Europe, a surviving British Empire, a rising Japan, but no single country calling all the shots. And without the absolute trauma of World War II, big institutions like the United Nations, they're probably never even created. And that's really the bottom line, isn't it? The world born from America staying home avoids some of the absolute worst horrors of our own history. Nazism, the Holocaust, the constant threat of nuclear war. These things are either avoided completely or are so different we wouldn't recognize them. But that doesn't automatically mean it's a better world.
It's a world where colonialism likely survives for decades longer. A world with bitter regional rivalries that could spark all kinds of different, brutal conflicts. And it leaves us with this really unsettling question. By dodging the catastrophes we know, what new and unknown horrors might have taken their place? Which version of history, in the end, was truly the better one?